And now for the part of the book that really rustled everyone's jimmies. 33 years after the Dark Portal. The Horde and Alliance had defeated the Burning Legion, but, despite our best efforts, ignoring Sargeras' giant sword stuck in the planet was not making it go away. At the site of the wound in Silithus, Trade Prince Jas de Gallywix had discovered a strange new material, one that would become known as Azerite. The goblins had actually encountered this material before, many years ago, back when they'd mined too deeply on their ill-fated island of Kazan. But the Trade Prince reported this discovery back to War Chief Sylvanas, and she was so impressed with its power that she directed the Horde to gather as much of it as possible, very excited to see what military use the substance could provide. Meanwhile, the head of Stormwind's spy network SI-7, one Matthias Shaw, caught wind of the extensive goblin mining activity in Silithus, and brought word of that back to the king, as well as a small chunk of Azerite as well. And although the Alliance were completely unfamiliar with the stuff, Anduin could also sense its immense power. The Spymaster pledged to keep a watchful eye on the goblins and the Horde, whilst Anduin tasked the gnome leader High Tinker Gelbin Mechatork with researching Azerite. Find a way for it to be used, for the benefit of all peoples. Meanwhile again, Magni Bronzebeard, also in Silithus, had received visions from Azeroth of his late wife Ymir and his estranged daughter Moira. Visions that informed him that Azeroth needed help and healing and was dying or something. It makes more sense if you read the comic that I'll link in the description. Chronicle makes it sound like he had a bunch of dreams about his dead wife and went, "Azeroth wins!" The Speaker of Azeroth then travelled to every faction leader, informing them of this massive problem, and his journey eventually took him to Ironforge, where he spoke with the aforementioned estranged daughter. Moira suggested an order called the Conclave, which united all of the priesthoods of Azeroth. Perhaps they could help with the healing part. So, she introduced both Magni and Anduin to the Order's leader, Archbishop Alonzus Fowl. He was now a little bit more mouldy and undead. Another surprise, the older sister of the infamous Arthas, Kalia Menethil, was also a member, somehow escaping the slaughter in Lordaeron and then training under the Archbishop to become a priestess. The Order was represented by members of both Horde and Alliance, working together, which actually moved Anduin somewhat. 'Twas inspiring. Perhaps a true and lasting peace really was possible. So, the young king returned to Stormwind with a proposal. Let us allow the forsaken undead of the Horde to reunite with their living human alliance relatives. However, only Velen and eventually Turalyon supported that. Everyone else thought it was a very bad idea. But Anduin was undeterred and continued with his plan anyway. What Anduin did not know was how deeply his actions would offend Sylvanas. Firstly, Lordaeron was the seat of power for the Forsaken. Kalia Menethil was the rightful heir to that throne, but she was also the sister of Arthas, the man responsible for all of the things. But also, Sylvanas' duties as war chief had actually taken her away from Lordaeron and her Forsaken followers. A new leadership, the Desolate Council, had been formed in her absence, and they were already proving to be a bit of a nuisance, prodding at her hold over the faction. On top of all of that, there was just a little bit of baggage there as well. Anduin's father Varian had executed Sylvanas' messengers of peace in her early days as leader of the Forsaken. Things had not changed that much since then. People were just as likely to turn away in disgust at the sight of a zombie now as they had been all those years ago. But despite all of that, the gathering went ahead anyway. Living and undead alike came together in the Arathi Highlands. The reaction from the living was mixed, but some of them reunited happily. Kalia particularly enjoyed the joyful reunion. It was a Menethil that had torn these families apart, so it was nice to be a Menethil that was bringing people back together and stuff. Unfortunately, everything then went to poop. Some of the Forsaken, reunited with their families, decided they wanted to defect to the Alliance. Sylvanas, atop Thoradin's wall, caught wind of that and recalled her Forsaken to confirm they were absolutely certain that's what they wanted to do. But some of the Forsaken at the gathering said, "No, we will not come back and explain ourselves." And this was then made much worse when one of Sylvanas' followers claimed that it was Kalia Menethil who was at fault for these defections. In a fit of rage, Sylvanas then ordered her Dark Rangers to just start bloody killing defectors, loyalists, who cares? Whilst she fired a dark arrow at Kalia, piercing the heiress of Lordaeron's heart before Anduin could reach her. The young king then challenged Sylvanas, stating that any further action would start a war. So, the Banshee Queen ordered her Dark Rangers to stand down, permitting Anduin to take Kalia's body and bugger off. So all in all, the gathering had indeed been a very bad idea. Kalia's body was taken to Netherlight Temple, where the Naru Sara brought her back as a light undead thing, and she, in this new form, vowed to educate herself on what the Forsaken had endured. Anduin then returned to the Arathi Highlands and buried the Forsaken that had fallen at the gathering, with Gen Greymane confessing that although he had been against the idea, the reconciliations had moved him too. But this event had also reinforced his absolute hatred for Sylvanas Windrunner. Anduin, however, was not willing to entertain the idea of retaliation against the Horde. Though cruel, the Banshee Queen's actions had not technically violated the terms of this gathering. She had only killed her own people, and Kalia, who was not officially an Alliance citizen, and therefore it's fine. The Three Sisters comic kinda slots in here. Link in the description. I highly recommend it just to see how butt-ugly Varisa and Ronin's kids are. But here's a brief summary. Illyria, who had been away from Azeroth for a millennium, was eager to reconnect with, and know what had become of, her sister, Sylvanas. She'd heard that Sylvanas was Forsaken now, but Illyria had been touched by the Void, so who was she to judge? She sent an invitation to both of her sisters to join her in Eversong Woods. Go on a hunt, cleansing Windrunner Spire of any scourge squatters. The reunion was full of emotions, anger, resentment, grief. Illyria did gain a better understanding of Sylvanas' torment, and Varisa apologised to Sylvanas for abandoning their plan to assassinate Garrosh in the War Crimes novel. Sylvanas, however, had actually intended to kill both of them at this reunion. Just couldn't bring herself to do it though, for some reason. Anywho, we just jump right into the pre-patch stuff now with no segue whatsoever. Using a Titan translocator, Magni and a champion managed to gain access to an ancient Titan chamber beneath the sands of Silithus, the Chamber of the Heart. There, the World Soul Azeroth spoke to the champion through Magni, manifesting a special amulet, the Heart of Azeroth. Infusing this special necklace with Azerite would help to heal the World Soul, or something. You can't polish a turd, alright? Next, the War of Thorns. Unbeknownst to pretty much everyone, Sylvanas' pact with the Jailer was now beginning to escalate. The death of Argus' World Soul had broken the Arbiter. Souls were no longer being sent to their correct afterlives in the Shadowlands. They were all flowing directly to the Maw instead. With enough souls, the Jailer could break free and enact his plans. And what better way to provide a bunch of souls than start another war? Initially, Sylvanas considered outright attacking Stormwind, but in order to maintain her position, she was going to need to be a little bit more sneaky than that. So, drawing upon High Overlord Varrock Sarfang's experience of repeated war with the Alliance, she convinced the Orc that lasting peace was impossible. It was only a matter of time before things kicked off again. And that worked. Together, Sylvanas and Varrock then crafted a plan to capture the Night Elven capital of Darnassus and conquer the entirety of Kalimdor. First, they sent an army in the direction of Silithus, and the Alliance reacted in exactly the way they hoped. Like hell were they going to let the Horde have all of the Azerite. So, the Alliance sent a massive army there as well. But a big old chunk of the Horde army broke off at the last minute and head to Darnassus instead, leaving the Alliance scrambling to play catch-up. In Ashenvale, both Sylvanas and Varrock somehow managed to defeat the Archdruid Malfurion Stormrage. I use the word somehow because although yes, Varrock did dishonourably throw an axe at Malfurion's back, there is still quite a big power gap between those characters. Sylvanas then departed, ordering Varrock to bring her the Archdruid's head, rather than just, I don't know, take his head now. He's right there, Sylvanas. But Varrock could not bring himself to finish the kill. Tyrande Whisperwind then appeared, showing Saurfang both of her middle fingers, and then hearthed her husband to safety. But things did not look good. So, the Night Elven forces retreated to the assumed safety of the World Tree Teldrassil and their capital Darnassus, and it was at this point that Sylvanas saw a clear opportunity to provide the Jailer with countless souls, ordering the Horde to burn Teldrassil and all of the people there. Varrock loudly warned against this. It would only unite the Alliance against them, but the Warchief did not care. Untold Kaldorei and Gilnean refugees died in the subsequent burning. Queen Mia Greymane led the evacuation effort and was among the last to flee the city, after being pulled from the fire by her husband Gen, carrying in her arms a little elf child, the last Night Elf survivor of the blaze, one which Tyrande subsequently named Finel, which translates to the last. Hey, what's your name? The last? The survivors of that horrifying assault gathered in the Azamist Isles and the city of Stormwind, and King Anduin acted in the only way he possibly could. A declaration of war was delivered to Sylvanas, just as she'd hoped. And so, the fourth war between the Alliance and Horde began, which is especially frustrating because it means the battle for Azeroth is technically Warcraft 4. Next up, the battle for Lordaeron. The Horde's unprovoked attack on Darnassus was supposed to crush the Alliance's morale, but Anduin wasn't going to let that happen. So, he and his inner council came up with an equally devastating act. One specifically designed to hurt Sylvanas rather than the Horde overall. An invasion of Lordaeron and the Undercity. As they amassed their forces outside the old human capital, High Overlord Varrock Saurfang was moping about, deeply troubled by all that he'd just done and witnessed, actually intending to stroll out alone in the night and take on the entire Alliance army by himself, ensuring a noble death in the process. However, he was talked out of that by a young troll named Zakan. Zappy Boy reminded Varrock that the Horde was the only family that many of its soldiers had left. Their war chief may have committed an irredeemable act, but the Horde itself was not beyond redemption. As dawn broke, the battle for Lordaeron commenced, with all the stuff in the announcement cinematic happening here. Out of desperation, Sylvanas deployed a war machine powered by Azerite to bring down the Alliance siege towers, and when that didn't work, she unleashed a new and improved strain of blight onto the battlefield, which killed both Alliance and Horde soldiers, with their corpses being raised by Sylvanas to continue fighting for her. Shocked at the sight of the war chief slaughtering her own people again, Anduin called for a slight retreat, ordering survivors to regroup along the tree line. At which point, an unexpected but welcome sight appeared overhead. Lady Jaina Proudmoore had returned. After rage quitting the game, Jaina had secretly visited her homeland, disguised so as to not be recognised due to the fact that her people loathe her after the whole betraying her father thing. After that, she'd ventured to the ruins of Theramore, and from there, she'd rowed out to the resting place of her father's legendary flagship, and having a little sing-song, she wove a massive spell and raised the ship from the depths. And here she was, arriving at the battle for Lordaeron atop said ship, now mended and sailing on a current of arcane energy. Jaina launched a Frost Nova, which froze the Blight, allowing the Alliance to surge forward, and she fired the cannons at the walls of Lordaeron, clearing an opening for Anduin's forces. Inside, the Alliance collided with Saurfang, who was continuing to fight, not for Sylvanas though, for the Horde. But he was very quickly captured. Anduin, Gen, Illyria and Jaina then made their way to the throne room and confronted the warchief, who was sat Captain Kirkstyle on King Terenas' former seat. Anduin demanded her immediate surrender, but she just taunted him, let out one of her banshee wreaths, and then unleashed yet another round of blight. Jaina teleported the Alliance folks to safety, but Sylvanas had scorched earthed it. She may have lost the Undercity, but the Alliance weren't going to have it either. And that's all the pre-patch stuff. To win this war, the Alliance were going to need a powerful fleet, for some reason. Jaina volunteered to return, again, to Kul Tiras, a nation known for its powerful navy, attempting to persuade her people to rejoin the Alliance. Keeping in mind, she's the worst possible person to do this, because she was the reason they left the Alliance in the first place. But she departed on her father's ship, with nothing but a skeleton crew joining her. Although the ship was allowed to dock, armed guards immediately escorted Jaina and her envoy to Lady Catherine Proudmoore, and that reunion went about as poorly as you would expect. Jaina's mother had nothing but scorn and anger for her daughter, tearing Daelin's pendant from her neck, symbolically, and instructing her dearest friend Lady Priscilla Ashfane to take Jaina and do whatever the hell she wanted with her, even if it meant the death penalty, whilst the Alliance contingent were thrown in jail. Inside said jail, the champion got to talking with a fellow inmate, a former pirate called Flynn Fairwind, and together they managed to escape, albeit with the help of another person, Talia Fordragon, daughter of Bolvar. Talia had no idea what had been done with Jaina, but if they wanted to have any hope of salvaging the Alliance's cause, they were going to need to gain an understanding of the complex political landscape within Kul Tiras. So let's do that. Although Kul Tiras was ruled by the Admiralty, there were actually 4 major houses in this region. House Proudmoore, obviously, of Tiragard Sound. Lady Catherine held the title of Lord Admiral because her husband Daelin was dead. Her firstborn Derek was also dead. Her secondborn Jaina was dead to her. And her youngest Tandrid was presumed dead. He was the captain of the Kul Tiran fleet, which had been missing for months. House Stormsong of Stormsong Valley. This family oversaw the maintenance and construction of the nation's fleet, as well as the training and well-being of its Tide Sages. But both the Tide Sages and Lord Colum Stormsong had withdrawn in recent months, and their absence had greatly hindered any effort to summon home the missing Kultiran fleet. House Waycrest of Drusvar, a family with a very proud legacy. They'd actually driven the Drust, a Vrykul people who had originally settled Kultiris, from the nation. Lord Arthur Waycrest had fallen ill a few years prior, with his wife Lady Meredith taking over his affairs for him, and they too had become elusive. But their young daughter Lucille was still available to talk to. And finally, House Ashfane of Bridgeport, a family responsible for the Ashfane Trading Company, which manages the wealth of the nation. Lady Priscilla Ashfane was the head of her house after the death of her husband, Lord James. Both House Ashfane and House Proudmoore had become pretty tight since the deaths of both of the husbands. With that understanding, we now had a plan: restore order to Kultiris and find its missing fleet. And apparently we did that by heading to Stormsong Valley first. Every vessel that entered or left the harbours of these shores would be accompanied by a Tide Sage, folks who could protect said vessels from angry waves or sudden squalls. However, the Tide Sages had all recently buggered off. Now the reason for this is that Lord Colum Stormsong had grown rather bitter. He believed that the elite of Borealis had basically been taking advantage of his house, and in that bitterness and resentment, he dedicated himself to a certain dark force. But anyway, the Alliance ambassador arrived in Stormsong Valley to discover shipbuilders in open conflict with the Tide Sages. And even more disturbing than that, one Tide Sage confided in the champion that the Whispers of the Sea had recently changed. They were no longer gentle and soothing, they were insistent and creepy. After a bit more investigating, we then made yet another grim discovery. The Tide Sages were ritually sacrificing villagers, at which point we decided that's outrageous and entered the Shrine of the Storm, working our way through that dungeon, taking everyone's ass. At the end of said dungeon, we encountered Lord Stormsong and finally learned what had taken hold of this valley. The old gods. 'Twas their whispers that had driven the Tide Sages mad. The Lord also revealed that he knew exactly where to find the Kultiran fleet, for it was he who had cloaked the vessels in darkness, preventing them from finding their way home. And they were slowly being guided towards the Naga Queen Ashara. We defeated him, but the dungeon wasn't over. The darkness still lingered in the place. So we pushed further into the depths and found a Naraki creature of the void, Volzith, the Whisperer. So we punched that thing in its multiple face sticks and cleansed the place of corruption. And that's it. That's Chronicle Volume 4's entire summary of Stormsong Valley. With the zone free from darkness, the replacement leadership and Tide Sages all pledged their loyalty to Lady Catherine Proudmoore, but also the Alliance's cause as well. Next, Drusvar. But first, a little bit more info about the Drust King. Long ago, a bunch of seafaring Vrykul known as the Drust had settled the regions of Kultiris, beating back sea beasts and Naga whilst building the roads and many of the structures and stuff. At first, these Drust practiced a form of nice druidism, but then humans arrived from Gilneas and started settling the place too. The Drust leader, Gorak Tull, didn't particularly want to share this land, so he twisted their nice druidism, insisting everybody practice death magic instead. The Gilnean settlers actually attempted to treat with the Drust at one point, which fractured the Vrykul people, with one Seth Ewin and her druidic thorn speakers making peace with the fledgling Kultirans, whilst Gorak Tull took his followers to war. A war which lasted years, pushing Kultiris to the brink. Right up until House Waycrest formed the Order of Embers and turned the tides of the war by discovering new weapons and magic. The final battle of the war was fought at a place that I'm going to butcher the name of. Golasij? I think it's Icelandic, and I think that's how the Icelandic people would say it. Gorak Tull had created a bunch of runic constructs, calling on dark powers, but Colonel Aram Waycrest got close enough to the Drust King and struck what everyone believed to be a killing blow. However, Gorak Tull and his Drust actually survived, because death magic. Their death magic came from a part of the Emerald Dream, the pocket dimension of Thros, the Blighted Lands, which lay at a unique confluence of void and death. When the Drust fell in battle, they did not go to the Shadowlands, but to Thros instead, making that place their home for the next lots of years, biding their time, waiting for an opportunity to return. Anywho, the Alliance ambassador arrived in Drusvar to find out why House Waycrest had gone radio silent, only to find the people of Fallhaven had been cursed, unable to move or respond. But after a bit of investigating and effigy destroying, the curse was lifted, and everything was fine. Next, we received news that the neighbouring town of Fletcher's Hollow was under attack by strange creatures made of wicker. The people of the town seemed pretty convinced that Lucille, the daughter of Lord and Lady Waycrest, was ultimately responsible for all of this nonsense. But we had literally just seen witches and stuff, so we knew better. We then did a whole bunch of quests to clear her name, heading into the town of Fletcher's Hollow, fending off wicker constructs and evacuating townsfolk, eventually receiving a letter from the mayor exonerating Lucille. And so, the constable currently holding her prisoner had no choice but to release her, because nobody can refuse a letter from the mayor. However, an ambush. One of the crones from the Heartsbane Coven arrived with even more wicker creatures, so we took her out. Marshal Everett Reed informed us that the Heartsbane Coven had spread unchecked throughout the entire region, doing all sorts of witchcraft. And unfortunately, Lucille's father, Lord Waycrest, had been kidnapped. The Marshal had been leading efforts to retrieve him, but Lucille's trial had kinda got in the way of that. Lucille had a theory that these wicker monsters might have something to do with the ancient death magic of the Drust, so we head to nearby ruins next. And there, we uncovered secrets of a long-lost forgotten organisation, the Order of Embers, with Lucille finding a book providing instructions on how to perform a ceremony creating new members for said order. So, she went ahead and performed that rite on a handful of Waycrest guards, and the Order of Embers was back, baby! Emboldened by the return of this ancient order, we then rode for Lucille's ancestral home Waycrest Manor, and did that dungeon. And there, Lucille learned the horrible truth. Her mother was leading the Heartsbane Coven, and she'd already turned Lord Waycrest into an undead. See, when Lord Arthur Waycrest had fallen gravely ill, Lady Meredith had called out to any power willing to save him, and guess who responded? Gorak Tull. He taught Meredith the Drust's death magic, and urged her to teach it to others, and convinced her to turn Arthur into a mutated abomination because that would save him, apparently. Lucille, the champion, and the Order defeated the horrors within Waycrest Manor, as well as Lord and Lady Waycrest. But, in doing so, a portal then opened to the realm of Thros. But, Lucille and the champion rallied their allies for one final push, and defeated Gorak Tull, banishing him back to the realm from whence he came. And all was right in the world. Lucille assumed control of House Waycrest, and grateful for our assistance, travelled to Boralis, where she also swore her support to Catherine Proudmoore. Next, Tiragard Sound. Shortly after returning to the Kultiris capital, the Alliance ambassador uncovered a plot against the Proudmoore family. Lady Priscilla Ashfane was engaging in an elaborate conspiracy to overthrow the Admiralty, using her house resources to secretly arm a local gang of pirates, the Irontide Raiders, with Azerite weapons. On Lady Ashfane's command, the Irontide Raiders would attack Boralis, spread terror through the streets, and ultimately undermine Catherine's authority, allowing Priscilla to rise to the top. In an effort to stop this from happening, the Alliance champion, Flynn Fairwind, and Talia Fordragon head to Freehold, a lawless haven for pirates and criminals. There, they defeated the leader of the Irontide Raiders, Harlan Sweet, as well as a bunch of other co-conspirators as well. But that didn't stop anything from happening. Pirate ships armed with Azerite stuff began attacking and blowing open Dalian's Gate, which had long protected Tiragard Sound's inner bay. The champion was able to repel that invasion, but it was only a matter of time before Priscilla's pirate forces regrouped and struck again. And just as Priscilla had hoped, panic was beginning to spread swiftly amongst the populace. Frightened and angry Kultirans were now gathered at Proudmoore Keep, demanding answers and accountability. Lady Ashfane, still posing as Catherine's friend, urged the Admiral to step down, allow her to shoulder the responsibilities of Lord Admiral, and Catherine agreed with that. However, as she stepped out to address the crowd and announce her decision, Talia arrived, denouncing Lady Ashfane as a traitor, backing that wild claim up with evidence showing that the pirates had been armed with weapons produced at Priscilla's foundry. Catherine was understandably devastated and furious by this betrayal, but Priscilla didn't give a shit. She called the Proudmoores a bunch of useless twats, fired her gun at a nearby sack of Azerite and cheesed it. Now, everyone knew that she would probably return at some point in the near future, but for now, all was right in the world. Catherine thanked the champion and Talia for uncovering the truth, noting that although she could not currently pledge her nation's fleet because it was still missing, she did wish to parley with the Alliance. News which we immediately reported back to Gen Greymane. And the last bit that we'll do in this video, finding Jaina Proudmoore. Conversations began between the Alliance and Kultiris, and during those, it was discovered that Catherine did in fact still hold some affection for her daughter. It was complicated. Catherine was still working through her feelings and stuff. But interestingly, nobody actually knew where Jaina was now. Being one of the most powerful mages alive, it was possible that she'd simply escaped and did not wish to be found. But Catherine was actually having visions of Jaina burning, visions that felt too real to ignore. It was Gen that urged Lady Proudmoore to devote resources to finding Jaina. This was a second chance, a chance which Gen did not get with his own son. And so, Catherine again turned to the Alliance champion and asked them to find Jaina and bring her home. First, we ventured to Priscilla's former parlour in the Ashvane docks, discovering that Lady Ashvane had contracted brigands out of Freehold to move Jaina somewhere. So we head back to Freehold for our next clue, and found it. Jaina had been taken to Fate's End, an island off the coast of Stormsong Valley, a place where all the worst criminals were exiled. Unfortunately, only a Tide Sage could safely navigate there, so we found a Tide Sage. At Fate's End, we saw Jaina's staff on the beach, and upon fiddling with that for a bit, we were set upon by a bunch of Drust, with Gorak Tull himself taunting us. Turns out Jaina, as well as many exiles before her, had been taken to Thros, held by the Drust King in his realm of torture. With the assistance of Thornspeakers, Lucille Waycrest, and Lady Catherine Proudmoore, a doorway to Thros was opened, which the champion and Catherine stepped through, immediately seeing an echo of Jaina taking on the form of a small frightened child, running around being traumatised by visions of her darkest moments, whilst Catherine, gaining new understanding of her daughter's personal pain with each passing second, started to feel ever so slightly guilty. Had Jaina truly been bearing all of this for all of these years? Yes. 'Twas the power of motherly love that broke through the cruel and dangerous illusions, reaching Jaina. That and the fact that we fought and defeated Gorak Tull in his own realm, which also helped save the Archmage as well. So take your pick. Either it was feelings or good old-fashioned violence, whichever you prefer. We then returned to Borealis just in time to see ships converging on the place. Just as we'd predicted, Priscilla Ashvane had returned, intent on taking the city. The champion and Talia quickly moved to call forth the militia and prepare the citizens for the incoming onslaught, whilst Jaina and Catherine just stood on a bridge. The harbour's defences were not going to be able to stand against these ships. All was wrong in the world. Catherine then returned Dalin's pendant to her daughter, informing her that it was more than just a necklace. It was meant for the true Lord Admiral, the one who could bring their lost ships home. And that wasn't just a metaphor, because Jaina then immediately used the necklace to bring their lost ships home. With a crash of thunder, the missing Coltiran fleet returned, surrounding Priscilla's comparably meagre forces. At the helm of the main ship, Tandrid, Jaina's youngest brother. Lady Ashvane immediately raised the flag of surrender, and she and her followers were taken straight to Tol Dagor prison. And that's it, for now, alliance-wise. Catherine assembled representatives from all of the 4 major houses, declaring Jaina as the new Lord Admiral, and Kultiris' bond with the Alliance was finally restored. However, the Alliance's efforts in Kultiris had not gone unnoticed. War Chief Sylvanas was determined to gain the upper hand for the Horde, and we'll get into all of that in the next video.